Okay, so for the last 4 years since I left university, I have had the pleasure to work in sales. And throughout that time, I've honestly been exposed to some of the most influential and persuasive individuals on this planet. And I say that because a large proportion of selling is the art of persuasion. So throughout this video, I'm going to share with you some of the top tactics that I've seen used to help persuade other parties that simply don't get used outside of sales, to be honest. And I'm going to leave you with some takeaways that you can hopefully start to implement in your day-to-day life so that you can start to be a bit more influential and persuasive in whatever domain it might serve you. Okay, so the first technique that I was exposed to was the art of effective storytelling. Now, there is no mistake about it. Storytelling is the most persuasive form of spoken word out there. Why? Because it touches on both the logical and emotional sides of each person's brain you're interacting with. So you're winning their hearts and their minds. Now, the first occasion I was exposed to very effective storytelling was in my first year at cybersecurity sales. I had the opportunity to shadow the highest performing rep that year, a chap called Paul, when he was on a call with one of the most difficult industries to work with, public sector, selling cybersecurity. So the meeting began, I sat back and listened. The first thing I noticed about Paul was how much of an incredible storyteller he was. Whenever the client would speak out about a problem or a concern he would have with the solution, Paul would have a magnificent ability to simply pull out a story from his pocket, explaining how he had worked with a similar customer in the past who had a similar problem, even going as far down as labeling the emotion that the customer felt, and how throughout the course he experienced the value of our solution and ultimately overcame his problems and lived happily ever after. It was a masterclass in storytelling. By the time that the meeting concluded, Paul had dropped about 4 or 5 of these different stories, and I could tell that the client was so won over. He didn't have to display a single slide deck or presentation that day. He had touched both the mind and the heart of the client through the use of effective storytelling. Okay, so you're probably wondering at this point, how do I begin to learn storytelling so I can be a more persuasive individual? Well, the first place that I'd recommend is to go onto Google and search the 7-point story structure. The beauty of this method is that it gives you a really clear framework of how to craft your story, starting with your character, a problem that they're having, how they come to a big realization, and how that realization solves their problem and gives them a moral of the story, a key takeaway. Now, once you understand the shape of the story, then of course, like any other skill, you've got to start to practice it and build that storytelling muscle. The best technique I've seen for this is to write down a story of the day. Maybe it was an experience you had at the park or a good conversation that you had with your friend that led to a realization. The more you begin to practice this muscle, the better you'll be able to be at storytelling, and you can start to use that power in your day-to-day life to be more persuasive. Okay, so tactic number 2 to be a more persuasive individual is to ask effective questions. Now, the thing about persuasion is that it's a two-way street. First, you must seek to understand before you can formulate a persuasive response. The thing about questions is that they allow you to dig deep into the person you're speaking to's problems so that you can formulate a persuasive response that is in line with their motivations and is in the language that they understand. Okay, so let's take an example. Let's say that you want to start a clothing brand and you want your best friend to join because she's hyper creative. Yet the moment you ask her, you find out that she's a little bit hesitant at first. Now, the first things that are going through your head is you're like, maybe she doesn't have enough time on her hands, or maybe she just needs to understand how great of an opportunity this is. So without asking any questions, you go into a full pitch, explaining to her how great the clothing brand will be, how much money you think it's going to make for you both, and how it uses sustainable approaches so that it's not harming the environment. The problem with this technique is that you've just gone in blind. You finger in the wind at it and just guessed what is causing her hesitations about joining your team. And the likely outcome of that is it simply won't persuade her. Option number 2. Rather than go off into a full-blown pitch without asking questions, you take a pause and you begin to explore the reasons why she feels hesitant and what could possibly lend her with more confidence to working with you on your clothing brand. She begins to naturally open up and says, well, timing isn't the issue, but the problem that I'm actually having is I don't know if me and you would vibe too well in a team-like environment. So equipped with this new information, you can begin to respond in a far more persuasive way. Maybe it's, so I've listened to what you've had to say about us two working together, and I think we should put it to the test. How about this weekend, we spend 60 minutes on something you care about, maybe at the homeless shelter, where we can see how we operate as a team. Provided that we work together well, would you be up for dedicating next weekend for us working on this clothing brand? This response has taken into account her initial hesitations and has incorporated something that she's cared about, that homeless shelter. It's a far more persuasive response than simply guessing with a random pitch that doesn't align to what she cares about. So how do you learn to ask better questions? You simply go out and practice it more. The next time that you're talking to someone, really listen to what they have to say and use that as an opportunity to dig into why they're saying it. Once you've unveiled some of those motivations, you can begin to understand their thought processes so that the next time you communicate with them, it's in a language that they understand. So third and final persuasive technique is being a great listener. Now this is a trait I've seen across all of the most high-performing sales executives. Being a great listener isn't just sitting down and writing down information that the person you're talking to is saying. It's actually about being an active listener. So learning to summarize what the person has just said, as well as learning the power of silence to get more information from the person that you're interacting with. The benefit of this is twofold. The first is that if you listen to people well enough, you actually just start to form better connections with them. Everybody wants to speak in life, so when you actually come across someone who wants to listen to you, naturally you build a lot more rapport. And the second benefit is being a great listener helps to plant the seeds to ask incredible questions, which is point number 2, and to tell great stories, which was point number 1. So it all comes full circle when being a great listener. I remember in my second year of cybersecurity sales, I was being mentored by a really experienced and really effective salesperson called Mark. Now, Mark's golden piece of advice for me that he said has served him upon years on years is a great ability to listen. Simply put, he said, listening to a person or a client that you're speaking to, they will tell you exactly what they need and exactly how to get there. He also made a point of mentioning the power of the 5-second silence. Once somebody has stopped speaking, just be quiet for an extra 5 seconds more, because it's usually those really small moments where they go on to say another thing that could have been a critical piece of information for you delivering back your persuasive response. On the flip side, some of the lowest performing and least persuasive sales reps I've ever experienced have been those who cannot stop talking and who cannot simply listen. I only had an experience of this last week. I went into a home improvement store wanting to buy a new oak picture frame for a family photo that I wanted to hang up in my apartment. And the moment that I walked into the store, I was greeted by a young bushy clerk who asked me, "What are you looking for?" I said picture frame, and he instantly takes me to the picture frame section. Before even allowing me to speak a further bit more, he goes on a massive pitch about how he thinks the new steel picture frames that they've just had come in would be a really good fit for me. He said it would look great in a modern apartment, it would be great to hang up art. I didn't live in a modern apartment, I didn't want to hang up art. And we wasted 2 minutes having an interaction that was not in line with anything that I cared about, and quite honestly left me feeling quite frustrated having wasted both our times. Once the quite awkward and cringy conversation finished, I said thanks for your time and went ahead to look for an oak picture frame. When I left the store, honestly I just felt a little bit annoyed. I felt like I didn't receive good service. I felt completely not persuaded in any form to use that business again. And I felt like my time had been wasted from what could have been quite a pleasant interaction if he had just listened. Okay, so I hope this video was useful today. As I said, all of these tactics have been sourced over my 4-year experience in sales. They've been taken from some of the best reps, and I've personally incorporated them to close a lot of business and to be a more persuasive individual. They can all be used outside the context of sales. They apply to everyday life, absolutely everything. So we went over how to be a more effective storyteller, how to ask better questions, and how to be a more effective listener. Using all 3 of these in combination will make you a monumentally more persuasive individual. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to like, leave a comment about any topics you'd be interested in the future, and subscribe. And of course, I will see you next week on the next one. Thank you.